Let's do the glass slipper waltz. Let's take a turn round the floor. You'll be Prince Charming, and I'll be alarmingly yours, evermore, evermore.
As we said in the description for this presentation, artists are everywhere. Entering long-term care does not mean creativity or the desire to collaborate with other artists stops. In many cases, Unmasked Connections has meant a long-term care resident and an artist meeting for multiple sessions in which both artist and resident or artist resident share their work and converse on how their art links up with their lives. Poetry, spoken word, and other forms of literature have been especially popular, interestingly. So poet, actor, playwright, and producer Eleanor Crowder has been meeting with Barby Clement, poet, musician, singer, songwriter, and long-term care resident. I had the privilege of sitting in on one of their virtual sessions, and I knew watching it that something very special was happening. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Eleanor and Barby.
Well, I grabbed a bus this morning and now it's nearly night. I was feeling free and easy 'cause I was traveling light. But now my ass is aching and my eyes don't seem so bright. I can feel all the smoke rings dragging and the road just isn't right. I got the blues, oh yeah. I got the Voyager colonial blues. Well, the car's out on the highway, the lights that turn you blind, and there's lovers talking softly right on the seat behind. They got lovin', they got laughing, they ain't got no peace of mind. Well, I ain't got none either. There's a man I gotta find. I got the blues, oh yeah. I got the Voyager colonial blues. I ain't got no lover waiting, but you know the man I mean. He don't know if he loves me, and I ain't sure I love him. And I don't know where we're going, and I don't know where we've been. Sure feels lonely here beside me. I know what I'm needing. I got the blues, oh yeah. I got the Voyager colonial. No one's feeling matrimonial. Single ticket lonely old blues. Oh yeah. I got the Voyager colonial. Voyager colonial blues.
Yay!
Much better with you to sing it too.
Thank you so much. Well, I was tempted to throw in the harmony at the end, but I thought maybe I wouldn't.
Well, Zoom doesn't do it. Zoom kind of throws it. It's the tough piece about Zoom. I'm going to have to come visit and we will sing harmony one of these days.
Good. I would like
That's a
that.
promise. It would be fun.
I started out in life as a what would I be? A fairly high soprano. And I'm now a fairly low contralto. So I've run the range. So now it's my turn to sing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I'll have to sing because I wish I had practiced a little more. But anyway, just a little brief introduction to this. My parents gave me a gift in 1987, and it was just after I had been divorced for the second time. And lo and behold, a baby grand piano showed up at my door. And my parents were there with the movers, and they had given me this wonderful piano. And within 24 hours, I had started to compose songs and write what I call my Broadway musical. And this is one of the key songs. And enough of my friends and family liked this enough that I was asked to sing it at weddings, believe it or not. And so I did. And it's already out in the public domain, but not published or printed yet. The Glass Slipper Waltz. I've always needed somebody to love me. I've always needed somebody to care. I've always wanted somebody to need me, but there's never been anybody there. Yet I've always believed in fairy tales, Prince Charming, and glass slippers too. Oh, I've always been sure about miracles, and that make-believe really can come true. Let's do the glass slipper waltz. Let's take a turn round the floor. You'll be Prince Charming, and I'll be alarmingly yours, evermore, evermore. I've never been a prom queen or a screen star. I've never finished first in any race, but I've never stopped to question where the dreams are. I guess I knew there'd always be a place where you'd take my hand and a dream comes true. Worldly cares just vanish into space. Now here you are, standing. I'm sorry, I'm really losing it. Standing right in front of me. And I hear a promise, I see a promise written on your face. Let's dance the glass slipper waltz. Let's take a turn round the floor. You'll be Prince Charming, and I'll be alarmingly yours, evermore. Let's do the glass slipper waltz. Let's do a turn round the floor. You'll be Prince Charming, and I'll be disarmingly yours, evermore, evermore.
I love those internal rhymes.
Sorry about the rendition. I really need to practice tremendously more.
Well,
But
I
there
don't know.
you have it.
I love that song. I really, the alarmingly
Thank you.
yours, disarmingly yours, charming. It's such a nice set of rhymes. They tie together so beautifully. It's really lovely.
Thank you so much.
Well, a pleasure to hear it. And it's funny because going the other way around and then into Glass Slipper Waltz also was very fun. It's not quite what we thought we were doing. So for people watching, this is the game we play because Barbie's linked rhymes in that threw me into going, oh, right, wait a minute. There's a song that I do that does the same kind of game with single ticket, lonely old, feeling matrimonial, voyageur, colonial. It's the same kind of game. So I'm going to jump. No, we're not. You're going to jump into Cadastro. That's where we decided to go to.
That's where, I'm sorry, my phone is now ringing.
Do you have your poetry book handy?
The lady helping me with the lady with the poetry has just gone over to answer the phone, but she'll hand me the book very shortly.
Well, then why don't we jump? Since we've flipped the order, let's jump to mine and see how it works that way. It's always a discovery.
Let's do that.
Okay, so
I'd like to be able to mute my line, but I don't know how to. Here. I can't, I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it, because better we don't lose you again. That was quite frightening. That was too much like, whoa, here we are in outer space and I don't have Barbie to talk to. Bring her
I'm
back.
sorry about
No,
this.
no, you're here
Really
now.
am, Eleanor.
No worries. Here is Safe Harbor, which is sort of what
It was a friend of yours who couldn't get in, so.
Who
told her
couldn't
it's
get
being
in?
taped. Yeah, I told her it's being taped.
Okay.
well,
what
so
do you need,
such
sir?
is the reality of Zoom. The white book, please.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
right
I have
here.
the white book, sorry. I have the white
No
book.
worries, it's okay. This is how it works. Zoom is an astonishing thing that in fact we can connect to each other. It's here we are in the ether.
Here I am with my little picture of me and the book is
Woman in the Rough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Woman in the Rough, Collected Poems by Barby Clement. And the book is too big, of course. But this is, what did we agree? I would start with cadastro, right?
Yes, exactly. So
cadastro is a little bit of a made-up word. It makes more sense in French, I think.
yeah, le plan
However, it's in
cadastral.
Pardon?
If people know that the plan cadastral is the marked territory when you buy a house or when you have a piece of land, and plan cadastral is where you belong.
Right, thank you. You have found your home. Your eyebrows allude to a palace by the lake, where the porch is strewn with the collectibles from 100 others' lifetimes. There's lawn to mow, the fence to paint, canoe to patch. Tomorrow, 2 black cats bask in the aftermath of a sultry solstice day, purring bellies filled with curdled milk. Nighthawks flirt in the peach horizon as dusk descends. Then frogs, the dark, and stars. Sleep comes like an angel's breath. Grab your rod at dawn. A new day starts again. Take hold. Then sprint to morning dip right off the dock. Stop just long enough to plug in the old perk. The creases in your cheeks, where once dwelled tears, are now etched in evidence that you have been smiling at the sun.
I love that. It's such a sweet, sweet, sweet vision. It's just like, so nice. So here is a poem which Barby's poem sent me to find. It's called Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor. In my heart's eye, we are playing perfect love. Breathing blue sky. We are sailing clean thigh to thigh. We are tanned, tow-headed. Your eyes shine Aegean. Mine are more Atlantic. Thoughts spark and kindle, tussle gladly and resolve. We could run before the wind all day. In my ears, storms should be crescendos, but here is only nagging thunder. Menaced by growling horizons, we are storm-tossed without a compass, no keel, no ballast beneath us, no plain sailing. In my heartland, the boats bob at anchor. In my heartland, the boats bob at anchor. You are on the dock, carefully knotting lines that will catch us fish for supper.
Wow.
Well, which is one of the joys of both of our work, is that I said this in relation to film recently. I have seen very few films made in Canada, and in the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen, I think, 3 different films that were shot very locally. And, you know, that peach sky that you were talking about, it's so of here, the running into the cold water and getting in the lake in the morning or the river or wherever it is. It's such a part of our lives. And it's one of the excitements of our work, is that we both have been talking about the joys of that all of our lives. And so this poetry, which is not very recent in this case, I mean, there are recent summer poems in my life, but this one's from a while ago. like Barby, about second marriages. And
Yes.
that the fact that we share that, that's a lot of what we do together. So you're
It
going to do
is.
the voyeur next, and we're going to let people know some of our other matching imageries.
Oh, yes. Now, let me look that one up here.
And I have to say to people listening in, we usually talk and talk and talk and then do a poem. So we're being
Yes,
rather
we
good today because
do.
we've gone up against a timeline. We want you to hear the poems because we think they're great poems.
So it's the voyeur now, is it?
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
okay.
And then I'm going to do the one, a linked one of mine.
Yes. Did I hit anything? No, okay. The geese are flying home, 2 by 2, with lifelong mate. Each finds his point along, I'm sorry, how about I read? Each finds its point along the ribbon as the sketch flutters indelibly across the still life of dawn. Ebony on tawny, a mood no medium can capture. My longing for you is no less because I steal away from your warm, moist body. The child in me still rises to the early morning excitement of the call of new life. The adult I've become gnaws hungrily on the dichotomy of freedom and commitment. There is desiring in my flesh as I stand naked at the back door, witness to the untouchable dance that teases me awake.
I love that poem. It's such a good poem, Barbie. I mean,
Thank you.
each time I hear that, the chewing on the dichotomy, read me those couple of lines again. That is so powerful.
The adult I've become gnaws hungrily on the dichotomy of freedom and commitment.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that is just so tight, so good. Yeah. Yeah. So geese in those amazing scales. So Barbie read me that poem a couple of sessions ago, and I went, oh, I have a goose poem. So this is my goose poem called Geese Don't Fly Over Calgary. And it's also about a time in my life where I was gnawing on a dichotomy of freedom and commitment. I say, borrowing your phrase, I hadn't actually quite tied that together thematically beforehand, but here we are. The geese don't fly over Calgary. All winter long, you told me to watch for the geese you were sending. I dreamt them over you in the warm eastern night, dark heartbeats of wings pulsing raucous promise through that velvet air where you sat on the back steps with Jamie, pipes lit and guitars, a parrot in the next yard, and my strawberries in bloom. Mayday, south of Grand Prairie, we halted the truck. A two-tone Silverado 4x4, without the necessary tires and chains for real tough stuff. Bear hunting, but the snow still slowed the willow shoots. There we were, thigh deep in the stuff. Granular cold, close-up white still winter soaked our pant legs. We were circling our campsite, guns in hand, when the honking started. It was only a pair, but that honking, that throbbing liquid howl of honking tore silence open wide. They arced across the trees down to open water, to land noisy on the river, splashing ice shelf shoals. You sent me a pair, only a pair, but their honking beat out the desolation of one, his spring still winter stalling stillborn in his veins.
Wow.
Similar times, similar ideas.
It's true. It's very interesting. And there's an even deeper word. It is almost frightening to think that these feelings do they just happen to women? Is that what it is?
I don't know, but I mean, I haven't read in looking for poetry any men's poetry that deals with exactly those kind of feelings. I mean, Robert Herrick, Andrew Marvell are always kind of going, come along, come to bed with me because we're going to run out of time. I mean, and one fell for that, right? There was a lot of times where you kind of went, oh, all right, fine, yes, we are going to run out of time, we better do it right now. And you and I are kind of obvious testament to some of the trouble that got us into and how we got ourselves out again. I'm not sure. I mean, I do think there's a huge parallel connection between what we've both lived as women trying to live our own lives and wanting family, wanting loyalty, wanting interconnection, but not wanting obedience, not minding being cherished, but not the love and obey thing.
No, that's right. That's right. But not the hurtful thing, for sure.
No, definitely not the hurtful thing.
Not
We had agreed, and we're going to have to let people start asking us some questions in a moment, but the last two sliding out poems, this one is one of my, it's not quite a brush off poem, but it's like a sayonara poem, and then you have lullaby. So I'm going to do you. Yeah. So this one's called You Wanted Poems. And I think what the listener needs to know is it's for a man who was the one who was being moved on from at that particular point in life, who had said all sorts of things about what he wanted, but not this.
Mhm.
You wanted poems. You wanted poems I never knew, handing you instead salami and the bread, offering wurst, a beer, slices of tomato, thinking you despised evanescence. I guess it wasn't so. So here's a poem, less substance than French crusts, dark slabs of rye, not much to stick between your teeth, less pungent. You'd find more punch in peanut butter, Stinkkäse, snapper subs, or beignet at the beach. This is a poem for you, a poem thin as rice paper, another layer, surprising like papaya, slippery a little, surprising as it bites down on a scent too fine for more than momentary redolence.
Wow.
Well, it's really funny because it's only when I read it to you that I realized quite what a kick in the tail it's got. I mean, I was like, oh, how clever. I made him a poem out of all the places where we ate interesting things. And it's years later that I look at it and go, oh, well. And I guess the fact that I was fairly pissed off shows.
I guess we've both written plenty of pissed off poems. That's what I'm thinking. Although I know that I've written soft and sweet ones, kind of like the Glass Slipper Waltz. But when it comes to poetry, I think I've been a little more able to pinch.
Well, because it's a subtle kind of pinch quite often, but you're going to do lullaby? Yeah. I want to hear lullaby.
Yes.
One of my favorite of your poems.
Now, let me just open this up. I'm sorry, Kim, can you take that? And then it's about, that was the voyeur. Here's lullaby. And me sitting alone at the picnic table with a friend's guitar.
Nice.
I used to have lots of blondish hair in those days. Lullaby. Without you, the world looks nude. The cats in the alley don't make love now, only howling, rancorous war. The proud Persian we named Spitzer had an eye dragged out the other night. It hung dead on his face for a day, then was gone suddenly, like you. I don't even ask myself why you left anymore. Part of me is still paralyzed, but only from the eyebrows down. There is no definition between pleasure and pain. Mostly I sit at the piano like a virtuoso whose fingers have been gnawed off, wondering why I cannot find the keys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it goes.
And so it goes. And so each of us has this trove
Thank you.
of poems that we are happily uncovering to each other because I think we have enough parallel experience that we certainly get what the other one is saying. But I've never written anything that is quite that strong, I don't think. I think that's a fantastic poem.
Thank you very much. I actually had 3 marriages and 3 divorces. I think the poems get more ragged as time goes on, perhaps.
Well, I think that's the thing about getting older. I think you get blunter. I mean, when I was 40, I suddenly thought it doesn't matter what my mother thinks anymore. By the time I was about 50, I thought, well, I think what I think is probably worth saying quite loudly if I want to.
Right.
It's only got worse from there. So.
In a year from now, I'll be 75. I wonder what I would dare to write then.
Well, I'm excited to keep hearing it because I think you will.
Thank you. Thank you.
So at this point, Jenny, Carol, we're open for questions. We can happily go on reading each other poems and thinking about things, but I have an eye on your timing and wonder if this is where you want to go over or where. What's your pleasure at this point, listeners?
This has been a pleasure. For a while there, I wondered whether we should have had a disclosure at the beginning for the voyeur, the voyeurism into. Felt like a bit of a voyeur while we were watching and listening to you two and listening to your marvelous poetry and discussion, but also I don't know if I'd be curious to hear from people listening if it was what they expected to hear today from the two of you. But I think what I'll ask people to do who have joined us is if you're comfortable unmuting and asking questions, you can pose the questions orally, or if you're more comfortable with posing questions in the chat, please go there and I'd like to learn more about this. Is a panel. Maybe I'll start things off. This is a panel on social justice, and I'm just curious about for Eleanor and Barbie, how do you see Unmasked Connections and the discussions and the poetry that you've created together as impacting social justice? I don't know if one of you wants to start, Barbie, or
okay. You know, I had no idea that anything like this existed anywhere. And when Bree came in to ask me if I had ever heard of this group of people, the Radical Connections, my eyes, I'm sure, got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought, good grief, I've never heard of anything like that. I would love to be involved. And so then she gave me a list of names of people with whom I could connect. And without any previous meeting or knowledge of Eleanor, for some reason, I lucked in and said, yes, well, Eleanor sounds very interesting. How about that? And we connected. And from the very beginning for me, it was like a gift that had been given to me. Someone who thought like I think, someone who was very talented, somebody who was kind and generous in her listening and giving in her poetry. And I suddenly realized that she was not afraid to express the things that were going on inside of her. And it was such a welcome and welcoming connection. It was just wonderful. Eleanor, I will never forget you.
Well, luckily, I hope you don't have to.
No, right.
This doesn't feel like a thing which is going to be quickly over, because
No.
for me, it's exactly the same piece. But it's interesting, we've never talked about the nature of being women and writing poetry beforehand, and we started to talk about that today.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we both warm to in each other, is that we are powerful, clear voices who have written for ourselves and not made it very public. I mean, some of my poetry has been, I'm a playwright sometimes, and I've run theatre companies and made theatre all my life, and I live in Ottawa, so to survive as an artist making theatre, I do the whole thing. I mean, it's a long time since I've hung lights in the ceiling of a theatre, but I've done most of the other jobs, and I continue to do a lot of them. I'm a generalist rather than a specialist.
Yes.
But the poetry has always been a personal piece with a very small audience. And then in the last probably 15 years, I've made poetry with students as a way, with high school kids and with grade school kids, as a way of giving them a voice. I mean, specifically, that came out of working in northern communities where the standard "let's make theatre together" was just completely wrong. There was no way you could ask a group of First Nation kids to stand up and do voice exercises. For one thing, it's so insanely rude to make that much noise in a public place. And so the cultural expectation of solo voice and of listening to individuals is really different.
Mm-hmm.
And making your own imagery and then performing it, if you felt like it, or having me as a loud Western white person being willing to say it out loud, kids were happy to have me read their poetry in rooms, and after a while they began to be happy to read their own poetry, and we made a lot of big shared choral pieces that reflected all of our experience. But in fact, that's what I've always done in my own poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, many years after, I wrote a play about abortion, and a lot of my songs, and not poems, but some of my songs found their way into it as a way of giving the young woman who was a parallel to who I'd been 30 years beforehand a voice. But it was also coming out of experiences I'd had in those very far north communities, where if a logging truck blocks the road, there's no way you're getting to Winnipeg, where the one clinic is. And then the timing is gone, and then your life is different, and how do you deal with that? And so the poetry in my life is the personal exposure of what I'm thinking, where often the plays are what will fit within a publicly acceptable, publicly hearable way of dealing with something in a much more thematic and more politicized way.
Mm-hmm.
But the poetry isn't political, particularly, except as you and I keep finding out, which is that we have the same hopes and bitternesses. And when you read a bunch of it, it's like, oh, all right, here's a sort of tract about being female in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2010s. I mean,
Right.
we are mouthy
Right.
women. We are not the kind that shut up.
No, we're not. Try though they may. Well,
Carol, did we answer your question at all?
I love the roundabout way. I love the roundabout way that you did answer it. I think there is, when Unmasked Connections was inspired and brainstormed into being, pushed a little bit by the COVID protocols and the fact that we couldn't actually physically get into long-term care, creating these one-on-one virtual connections where people who had no access to art and the artists could actually determine not just what programming they wanted, but who specifically they felt could make a difference in their lives. I've been blown away. I think we knew this would be something special, and we knew that this would be improving access and humanizing people who were often in long-term care. The staff is busy. Often people I think, I mean, Barbie, you can probably speak to this better than anybody, but that not feeling that you're recognized as a person can I see that as huge when I'm a physician and walking around and caring for long-term care residents. That getting to know somebody better, which you two know each other now so incredibly well, and even by virtue of having this connection, the staff where you're living, Barbie, the staff, I think they know you better. I hope they know you better because of this connection. So that's where I think you did talk about the social justice component as well. And I don't know if I mentioned this right off the hop. I just want to thank you both for being incredibly vulnerable and sharing your stories and sharing your poetry, sharing your songs with us. Whenever I get a look at either the videos or get to hear you, these unmasked connections, I feel a great privilege. And so I just want to say thank you, first off, for both sharing your stories, sharing your poetry, and being willing to spend time with us today.
Well, you're very welcome.
And can I just ask hello to the two people who are in the astonishing cloister in the bottom left of my screen, but can I ask, where are you guys? It's gorgeous.
I believe that's Roger and friend.
Hello, it's Roger and Grant, and we are in Oaxaca, Mexico.
Oh,
Wow.
hi, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Really enjoying it.
It's such a
job.
contrast to the snow where we are. It looks amazing.
We just arrived here.
Thanks. Oh,
Beautiful.
how wonderful.
Really
So
enjoying the session.
wonderful.
Thank you for letting us see you. It's a treat.
Yes. Thank you.
Anytime.
From Mexico. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. It's wonderful to have something other than snow in our vision.
Oh.
Would anybody else? I'll throw it open to the group. Any other questions for either for any of us, for Eleanor, Barbie, Jenny, or myself? CJ?
First of all, Barbie and Eleanor, thank you. Wow, really impressive. And everybody else who's come together to organize this. I totally see what this is as social justice in terms of access, because I know you've heard me say, Carol and Jenny, but I really think that this point that like people that are living in some kind of assisted living should have equal access to the arts. And it's just proof that this one-on-one, how valuable that is, because lots of times, you know, you think that the entertainment is supposed to be something like 30 people listen to one musician, which is good too, but there's nothing that can replace this one-on-one exchange. And when I was doing the residency at St. Vincent's, it was completely different on the 6th session than it was on the 1st or 2nd one, because the conversation does, and the conversation and the essence of what the work is about does much more go to an individual level, and you can see the enrichment happening on the person who's coming in and on the person who's living in the long-term care or hospital. So I just wish that this kind of a video would be background for funding to large arts funders. I mean, I do believe this is totally the responsibility of arts funders to give this kind of support to Radical Connections. It's really fantastic, and congratulate you all. Yeah.
Thank you, CJ. Diane, I think you're next.
Great, thanks so much. So I'm going to start with a comment and then finish with a question, if you don't mind. So I think about art as speaking to our soul, speaking to our spirit, the essence that makes us who we are. And what I saw there was totally fascinating. I've seen you two together before. Seeing you again brought me even more joy. But there was a great contrast when Eleanor was singing to a blank screen than when she was singing to you, Barbie, when you were on screen. And it really speaks to the thing that I think you are creating so incredibly, that connection and collaboration and joy. There's kind of an honesty and authenticity that binds this this endeavor. And when I watched that, there was another thing that hit me, which was this was not just about autonomy, that is, Barbie, you getting to choose Eleanor to speak to you, but also incredibly about the interconnectedness. So this isn't about Barbie being entertained. There's something very magical going both directions. And I want to say, I love what is being celebrated here. And oh boy, do we need to scale this. Last time I talked about making the invisible visible, the unheard heard, and today I've got these magic vibes, which I just think are so wonderful. So I wonder if the two of you can speak to how that is for you. This was something introduced theoretically for the residents, but how does it, as it's developing, speak to your interconnectedness?
I'm going to jump into that one first, because when I said yes to being part of this project as an artist, I didn't expect to have it shift me as much as it has. I mean, what I've found is a pure to play poetry cafe with. I'm being challenged both to go look at work I did 20 years ago, and Barbie will say something and go, oh, I'm thinking of that one, but I don't necessarily have it in front of me. In the course of the time we've been talking to each other, I've started to look at my work as an oeuvre in a way I never had beforehand, which is really interesting. I mean, CJ, thank you for the brilliance of this initial set of connections, you and Carol and Jenny making all of this happen, because I'm finding that I'm affirmed by the fact that Barbie and I have similar takes on the world. Being mouthy women in our age group has never been particularly easy. CJ and I have known each other for years. We've stood on the sides of various meetings having divergent opinions from the lead one that was going down. We've sat at various arts funding things going, what the hell? Isn't it time to actually do some real work? This is real work, but it's also, as an artist, pushing me, inviting me to go new places, making me braver to do it with Barbie as a co-explorer, leading me to think about how can we take both of our work and put it into a slightly more public place if we're ready for that. I mean, it has had a huge effect on me as an artist, as much as any other project, and it's starting to have a length of time in theatre. You tend to work with people in fairly short bursts, not in my deeper work. My deeper work in the Skin Songs Collective has gone through now 4 or 5 years in one particular project, which will end in performance next June. But we're starting to build those sort of connections so that we are becoming co-artists to each other in a way which is really exciting. Barbie, to you.
You need to unmute.
No, I guess we're back. Can you hear me? It
Perfect.
says you are muted.
No, down
It's
here.
gone now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, magic is a very special thing. It's a very wonderful thing that can happen between any two people. And I think there's something very magical about two artists who find that their own work is enhanced by another soul. And I just think that's wonderful. And Eleanor, I don't know what I would have done had I chosen someone else. But I'm very happy that we made the connection and that we had times where we laughed, times where I guess we must have felt a certain amount of anger, not towards each other, but the memories that we have about some of those sad personal connections that we have had in our lives. And it's very special to find that. And the thought of being part of it continuing on is wonderfully endearing, wonderful. I can't thank you enough. I cannot thank the people who created this endeavor enough. And I hope people are enjoying it and enjoying it as much as I have. And as I believe Eleanor has. It's great. And bravo for Bruyère having taken this on with other collaborators, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, I do. CJ was part of this when we started, and I don't know that Radical Connections could have done it without Bruyère. I do hope that this is going to explode and be much more widely available. But these pilots are so valuable for figuring out what needs to happen, and it is magic.
Yes.
I love that.
But I've always believed in fairy tales and magic. You know that from the Glass Slipper Waltz.
Mireille, you've been waiting patiently. Do you want to go ahead?
Mireille?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just thank you both and thank you all for being here. Just the conversation reminds me of, first of all, my name is Mireille. I'm a chaplain at Elizabeth Bruyère Residence, and I'm a little bit of an accidental chaplain in that I moved away from the profession for 20 years, but at the time that the pandemic fell upon us, I was called back to the work, and I'm still there. I thought I'd be there for a couple of weeks, but I'm still there. And one of the reasons I'm still there is the relationships that I've developed with the residents. I only work 1 day a week, but I think I have learned a lot as I'm learning in this moment about how to create deeper connections, even in the midst of adversity. And I think art is an important window to that, an important way of entering those deeper connections. I'm reminded, I think, Eleanor, you were talking about the difference between your screenwriting and your poetry. And I'm reminded of something a resident told me early on when I was listening to her poetry. One day, I went to see her and I was eager to hear a new poem. And she said, "Oh, you don't want to hear the poem I have for you today." And I thought, no, actually, I really do. And it was a poem about polyester people and how she was experiencing, this, multiple transaction with people who were all doing the right thing and yet not being seen for who she was. And really powerful poem. And from there, she shared a couple of others, and I'm reminded, as you reminded me, that the depth of human experience we're given permission through those creative expressions of expressing something that we might not express in just regular conversation. So anyway, just deep appreciation for what you've shared and deep appreciation for how this has come together. And an offering one of the things that that we facilitated in the first summer after the first lockdown, in I guess it must have been June, that finally the residents were able to leave their rooms of 2020. And in July, I started working with an organization called Life Web 360, because we needed to find a way of allowing people to celebrate the lives of those who died during, especially the first wave of the pandemic at the residence. And as we were working on this virtual page, I thought, why are we celebrating just the lives of those who have died? Can this not be a platform to celebrate the lives of all the residents now, here? And so what we did is we split the page into a celebration of life for those who died, to honor them and to allow families to share pictures, stories. And then we saw a little bit of crossover between the families who remembered the loved ones of other people. And so there were interesting connections there. But then there was this other page, simply a community page, we called it, where residents were sharing poems, pictures, thoughts, reflections, and quite powerful. Now it's still there and it's still available to us, but it's gone dormant because what I realized is that people were encouraging it to continue, but I had gone down to one day, and we just didn't have the people to be able to. And I realized that the residents weren't necessarily accessing it unless they had help to access the pages, and so it was more for an external audience. And so the original intent kind of got lost, but the pages are there, and I'll share the link in the chat. But whether you know, it is a virtual environment, but I can attest to the fact that the virtual became actually a facilitator of connections between residents and between families of residents, much in the same way that that is being supported here. Anyway, I've gone way too long, simply because this resonates with what I see and what I feel. And thank you for enabling those connections, deeper connections.
Well, thank you for sharing, Wiebe. It's interesting to hear how that the celebration of people who died in the first wave ended up in celebrating everybody. And it is, at least before, when visitors were easily allowed, there was a strong connection between families of visitors as well. I think it's important to encourage and do what we can to facilitate community and connection. Jerry, you've had your hand up. Are you able to?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I must say that I was in the car when Eleanor, you started and lost that connection with Barby. And it was interesting just to reflect, and I think Diane alluded to this, but I think it was even more powerful because I didn't have visual. And I could just hear your voice sounded very different, even though you were trying to bring voice to what you were sharing through the song. And then when Barby did connect in, it just felt completely different. So it was a good reminder of the dialogue that it was happening between both of you, and not, you know, art without someone to reflect upon it and to bounce back and forth. It doesn't have the same power as what you were demonstrating by what you were sharing in real time. Totally unintended, but I think it reinforced the power of the work that that you're doing with this initiative. And just so thankful that we're having this opportunity to get a glimpse into this. So thank you.
CJ.
Yeah, it just occurs to me, because I just see this thing that Minka has put up, this teaching medicine link, which I will go into, but I wonder, what is the probability, or is it even possible to have some sessions where in universities where there are medical schools and art departments, to have people maybe have to do one little, like is time so, I don't know, is time so tight in a semester that there couldn't be time to do like one weekend project where the art person and the medical person get together. And it wouldn't even have to be at the highest level, but just to have those two kinds of students who have gone with different intentionalities, just, you know, meet and for like a one evening or 2 afternoons, and then when it gets presented back to the class, each to their own respective departments, it just might be such an interesting way, because one of the things that we really saw by watching Barby and Eleanor today was this really intimate thing that happens between the people. And even though I'm in my late 60s, I still feel that I got to witness something with, in a reverent way, I got to witness a kind of something sacred, because you really trusted each other. And I think that if something like Radical Connections is going to continue in this poetry way, already poetry is like, you know, we're all here and we all think it's cool, but most people go like, oh, poetry, it's like as weird as, you know, I don't know, wearing a corset or something. It's just like such a bizarre concept for so many people. And so I'm thinking if there was a more casual opportunity to experience working across disciplines in university classes, in an art school and a medical school, that could be a really good entry level, you know, break the ice thing for people that could take them into their further careers. Because Radical Connections also wonders, how can we bring more artists in to do this? And I'm bet a lot of medical people who attend these things at Sanokondu, you know, wonder, how can we get more people to allow this in the schools? And so maybe it needs to be done through just a really simple, like I remember when my kid was at McGill, he had to go home on Friday and be able to do learn CAD drawing over the weekend by Tuesday. I mean, that used to be a really hard thing. And now they're just expected to learn something, just pick it up. And there's nothing more powerful, as Eleanor and Barby showed us, than this like meeting personally and doing it. I think that, I wonder what people think about that.
I think Eleanor had just, were you going to respond to that, Eleanor? I saw your hand go
I
up.
was, sorry, my computer put something over my mute. There, I'm trying to remember the name. Jerry, she would have retired about maybe 10 years ago. She was at the school, the medical school in Nova Scotia in Halifax. She's who commissioned the play about abortion. There at that point was no abortion clinic in the whole of New Brunswick, and the ones in Nova Scotia were being shut down. And from a conversation at an arts and health conference, she came up with the money that allowed me to put actors together in rehearsal. We then toured it all sorts of other places, but she was the initial piece. She at that stage had her medical students or people within their medical school writing poetry, making pottery, doing exactly what you suggest, CJ. So there's certainly, it has been happening in some places. She was at the Arts and Health conference that was happening in Buffalo, which is now a good long time ago. But at that point she was presenting, which is where I met her. So some medical schools have made it happen.
Sarah, did you want to respond to that as well, or?
Sorry, I just unmute myself. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's like also just beneficial for like both parties too, like connecting to like music or art, because it just provides like, I mean, I'm not a med student, but I did like an undergrad in health sciences, so having like that balance of like having that artistic part too, and I think it's a really just a powerful way to connect and to like just learn and get another perspective, especially if like a lot of the people that are in the program, since it's through Bruyère, are like in long-term care or potentially more isolated. As a younger person, it's just interesting to get their like life experience too, and just to meet someone that's got maybe went down like a totally different path than you, and to just gain some perspective and like, again, just like learn a lot through like by connecting through music or art or poetry or whatever they find like common interest in. I mean, I definitely think that would have been like even again, not just for like med students, but just like as a younger generation to pair with an older generation to connect through music or art. And again, like everything from earlier at the beginning of the session, it was just really nice to like see that like just art and like people connecting through it. I think it's just super special and powerful. That's all I really had to say.
Thank you. I think it's a great discussion going on, and I do, CJ, I think it's important to get into the curriculum early on, and that's a way of building this kind of stuff. There is the Canadian Association for Arts and Humanities. They have a conference called Creating Spaces, and that's in Quebec City this year, and we are planning on presenting Unmasked Connections there as well. It's in coordination with, I don't know what it's an academic conference, and so it is a space where so I think we could potentially spark a broader incorporation of this into the academic world. We'll keep working on that. Jerry, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Maybe an old hand, but it's actually timely. I was just thinking about that whole question of academic, Carol, and the right question that I think it was CJ that was talking about this was like, how do we get it in? And the sad reality is like, is it valued? And depending, like if it is valued and resources are available and faculty support is there, it finds its way into curriculum. But how do we do that? How do we convey the power of what is being shared here when what is often being shared are stories and sort of essentially testimonials of like the power of the experience, but this is not necessarily the language that most academic faculty type people who are making decisions about curriculum, this is not what they look at typically, at least in my experience. And so I'm just thinking strategically, like how do we then convey the importance and meaning of this? Is it gathering the voices of patients that are participating and the artists and helping share that?
Eleanor, I think
more questions than answers, I suppose.
Eleanor's wanting to respond to that question, I think.
Well, and it's a long and slow piece, but do you guys know of Howard Gardner's Zero project at Harvard in terms of looking at multiple intelligences? I'm just looking for a general nod if I'm going to see one. I'm seeing a couple, and I'm seeing a nod from a couple too. Psychology, and I have spent time also as well as being a director, I spent time being a teacher and working at the university level in my life at different times, because I've lifelong fought against the undervaluing of the arts. I know how important it is, and I know how it changes people's lives. So one of the things I've looked for in the funding search is, what are the academic and objective reality evidence-based things that we can bring to that? The Howard Gardner project, the Zero project, over about 40 years has looked at ways people learn. It's educational psychology essentially, but the idea that people operate more complicatedly in not Myers-Briggs, which is 28, I think it's 28, but anyway, it's 4 different personality types run through a whole bunch of grids. When you talk about the 9 kinds of intelligence, which are teachable, measurable, and which each of us has in some different measure. And this is educational psychology, which is very broadly and well accepted within education. It hasn't been shown much yet, I don't think, in medical training. I have a son who is a doctor, and certainly 10 years ago when he was going through med school, it wasn't part of their training at all. I know I've done a couple of talks like this on multiple intelligences for general practitioners as part of this kind of medical certification, ongoing education. It's by now a known tool for how you talk about approaching people as humans, so that not only do you have physical and intellectual, but we've been using the word spiritual, but you can use emotional, you can use spiritual, but you can also talk about people's natural intelligence, it breaks people down into verbal, mathematical, geometric, proprioceptive, as in some people, athletes in particular, have much higher proprioceptive internal awareness. A lot of people have a very good external gregarious awareness of emotion and reading a room. Many doctors have that very, very well. A lot of people don't at all. A lot of people are very good at knowing their own self, but not very much about the people around them. And we're all mixes of all these different pieces. In the early 2000s, they added both spiritual intelligence and natural intelligence as two measurable parts of the ways people react to the world around them, that there are definitely people who are much more tuned one way or the other. There is a great deal to be said to people who have normal medical training, and normal is a wash and probably not fair, and it's not my field, but in addition to the mechanism of, for instance, surgical training, where you're fixing something which is specific and physical in the moment, all the way through to where general practice is very often talking about emotional well-being and the whole constellation of family and society around people. Somewhere in there, that model of the fact that people are made of those different intelligences, and that art speaks to each of the arts speaks slightly differently. There are people who completely operate musically. There are people who completely operate on imagery. There are people who are language-based. There are people who are physically body-based, and dancers tend to be them. I mean, try teaching a dancer a Shakespeare monologue, 1 out of 14 will manage. I've done it for years. I finally went, why am I doing this? It doesn't work. They think with their bodies, let's dance it instead. And then they do. But the reality is that we don't, as a culture yet, say that that's the normal pattern for how people work. Although education, particularly at the elementary level, has now for about 15 years. You go into any elementary classroom and these are the ways I learn up on the wall underneath the blackboard for 6 and 7-year-olds to talk about. So maybe we'll eventually get it into medical schools too.
Can I respond to that? I just quickly looked up the theory. I'm definitely going to read more. One of the things that I've in my free time looking into, so the bulk of my work is in healthcare improvement, and recently, very kind of taken by Theory U by Otto Scharmer at MIT, which really is an awareness-based systems change model. But it looks at intelligence in a similar way, I think, where, if I juxtapose it to our typical healthcare improvement processes, right, which are aborted too quickly. But Theory U invites us to go deeper, a deeper listening, and a listening that helps us to learn not from the past, but to learn from the emerging future, which requires us to have radical open minds, open hearts, and open willingness to explore, to try, to listen deeply, and get out of our comfort zones. And I think, I think the arts are not so artsy. I think the arts are actually a very, very effective avenue for helping us go deeper like that. Right? Get us out of our just thinking minds, and all of a sudden connecting that and embodying more of an awareness-based understanding of how do we move forward together. And art connects us to that sense of capacity, that sense of community, that power, that hopefulness. And I think now more than ever, right, we need to look for opportunities to tap into that and to connect through that kind of capacity building. So thanks again.
Thank you. I have to say, when I was trying to figure out what to do with my MBA, I thought very similar to what you're saying, Mireille, is that I either wanted to go in a direction that we ended up with Radical Connections, or I wanted to figure out I wanted to start a healthcare design company that had artists as part of the planning, the design team, because I think healthcare is desperately in need of some different thinking. Jenny.
Yeah, I just to address the kind of question on what arts does, like art kind of has the capacity to kind of open up kind of little worlds, and it can possibly be, in the case of Radical Connections, is kind of a shared world, and especially, which is very important, especially in the situation if you are in long-term care or in a hospital, has that capacity to kind of expand and kind of create a world to exist in. And hopefully that can go out and kind of connect with the rest of the world, but it just has this beautiful, expansive capacity. Yeah, I just wanted to voice that.
I know, I thought I'm going to put Barbie and Eleanor on the spot. When the question was raised, was it, who was it now? I'm forgetting who raised, maybe it was Jerry who raised the question. How do we get the word out? How do we get the word out that this is transformative and that we need to, both embed it within medical learning, art learning, and as well as embedded in practice. And I thought when you put your hand up, Eleanor, I thought, oh yes, yes, yes. You two are going to create a play.
Well, we may
Yes.
very well, but I mean, yes, we may. But in terms, I mean, we are talking about various things like that, but that is very premature to take curtains off them at this stage. One thing I don't know, does a 3-minute clip where Barbie reads a poem, I read a poem, that shows the parallel between the two of us, that simply gets lipped up on a medical student's second year Monday morning, second Monday in February. I mean, you have, Jenny, in that video you showed us of the beginning, you have a bunch of small moments. If Radical Connections were to make that available to the Ottawa U Med School and simply say, Tuesday mornings, you're going to get, this is your arts vitamin, watch it for 3 minutes. Is that something that would actually gently and slowly get the idea in that if doctors have the time to talk to their patients as people, that it may change the whole mix? The difficulty, it's not just doctors, it's anybody in healthcare, but the difficulty is that our system does not allow people the time. I mean, if that goes on, one, you break them apart because you don't have the therapeutic support to help you put it all together. And two, we don't have the money for healthcare people to spend that amount of time per patient. And that's, I mean, that is just the reality of a system where we have expensive healthcare and a very large population needing a great deal of attention. I mean, I think beyond something like that arts vitamin, can you see being able to do very much about changing the systemic grind of what most medical people are forced to deal with? It's not fault, it's simply reality.
Diane, go ahead.
So, I mean, these are great questions and a space I spend a lot of time thinking about. I don't think it takes as much time as you might imagine to create a safe space and an incredible connection with our patients, our clients. There takes a willingness and a self-awareness, awareness of other, but we can do this. And it is more this thought about either or rather than can we do both together? And so changing that discourse, I think, is probably the most important thing. There's also something that, in terms of deep listening, I didn't say, but I am a psychiatrist for those who don't know. And so I listen to what happens in my head between words, and it tells me a lot about others. Also, when someone comes into my living room and looks at my art, and they may start talking about it, and it tells me an awful lot. They don't really know what they're telling me about themselves, but they are. So there are things we could do to enhance self-awareness, enhance connection, that I think really don't take the amount of time. This kind of magic is special. It deserves time. We can do both.
Barbie, were you going to add something?
Well, I was just going to say that I have some of my paintings on my wall here in my room at Bruyère, one of which has made people a little bit angry and disgusted, I think. And one of which, and the same painting is very, to many people, exciting and inviting. And it's a very interesting way to get to know people. Diane, you're absolutely right with what you just said, that as people begin to talk about your art, you learn a great deal about them and their thoughts about you. And I think they don't even realize that most of the time. Sometimes
And that's a good thing.
Maybe. Although I think my art is not perhaps as, shall we say, poignant as my poetry. I don't know, Eleanor, did you catch an eye of a glimpse of my?
I have, and I was rethinking about that. I think your paintings are just as powerful. They're different medium, but definitely the poetry sort of leaves. Aha, yes, absolutely. There you are.
Wow.
The red and yellow one.
Yeah. Yes. You can't wriggle off the hook of your poems when you're listening, because some of them have such a really good embedded hook into them. You can look at that and go, oh, it's yellow and red, or you can look at it and go, oh my God, what an erotic piece of painting, or you can look at it and go, what is that? But it allows the viewer more wiggle room.
Yeah, Diane, did you want, your hand is up, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to illustrate this with just a short story. I had an interpreter in my office for a woman from Ethiopia, and we were going back and forth, and it was all, the history was unfolding, and I felt connected to the patient. And then the interpreter stopped and he said, "Who did that piece of art on your wall?" I'll tell you, it wasn't my art. And he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't think about anything else." and it was, again, one of those magical moments where he became a partner with me and with the patient. He wasn't just there interpreting. It was fabulous.
Think is our time. I don't know how long we had today.
I think we've got until 4:30, at least on the schedule, but I did have a question, and goes back to the short clips, and I'm thinking about it, and like I'm just trying to think of how to introduce these concepts practically in the busyness of the units. And I think it was alluded to how people just don't have enough time to think, let alone think creatively, which takes, I find, at least for me, a more concerted amount. Maybe it just doesn't come as natural to me, but well, given enough space and given enough time, I can. But how do we introduce this when everything in our system has devalued or undervalued the arts and humanities in our system, right? When we think about who gets into health profession programs, it's a rarity to be looking for someone who comes in with an arts and humanities background. And even still, while they are in these programs, they may have had interests or actively pursued those kind of aspects, but the program forces them to conform to a very different type of phenotype, a different type of personality. Like you can't continue with your music or your arts, and or even if you had recreational activities, like all of that is gone because it's all about the program. It's you're not spending as much time, and subtle and not so subtle commentary forces that. Is it little wonder that we are struggling with the reintroducing of these concepts into our system? And I think I struggle with this because I don't have an answer, and I'd love to think with all of you, like how to actually bring these concepts in, because I have been at those curriculum conversations, and the problem is that nobody wants to take anything out of the curriculum, and there's so much more that needs to go in. And then somebody puts something on a magic weighing scale, and arts and humanities always is not as valued as something else. Could be another topic, like bringing technology into medicine, or like ultrasounds or whatever it is. We're losing out on the things that actually make us human and bring the interpersonal connection. So once again, more questions than answers, but I would appreciate some thoughts.
We've got lots of hands up. I'll get Jenny and then Ian.
So just an important point to make. It's really a privilege to watch these particular clips. We have permission to show these clips like in this kind of a presentation, or to donors, and to use them for grant applications, but they can't, there's certainly limits to what contexts we can show them in. Like they can't go out on social media. So we have to be kind of just, there will be a recording, but some of the clips will be cut out because we don't have permission to show them to everyone. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be situations where the artist and the resident are comfortable sharing it, but it's a privilege, you know, to watch these, because for some people want to go public in it, but other people are more, you know, there's something kind of intimate happening there, you know, and they're not ready to kind of send it out to everyone. So just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for reminding us, Jenny. Ian?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a resident in oncology, and I guess I come from that perspective, which may be a little bit narrow too. I've enjoyed the arts, but to be completely honest, in medical school and in residency, there's no real incentive, I guess, to pursue it, and there's a lot of incentive maybe to cut it out. It becomes a hobby, or as we get into residency, even less than a hobby, because there's not that much time for hobbies. So I do wonder if it's again that question about how do we align incentives. And I think when it comes to the arts, what can be really telling and what may be important moving forward would be the patient voice. We seem to be moving more into a paradigm of patients as partners, I guess, or people or community-centered care. And I don't know if there's a way to collect maybe anecdotes or some type of data from patients through maybe pilot projects in order to tie it again to the incentives, one of the big ones being funding. And so that being hospital funding and maybe the charity organizations that support those hospitals. And then also tying it, I guess, to the value-based care that we hear about and some of the harder metrics like length of stay, et cetera. But just some thoughts.
No, I appreciate that, Ian. And there actually is some evidence that it can be, you can save money by having artists as part of care. But it's hard to, it's a hard sell to make right now. Minka, and then Eleanor.
Hi, so Minka Chan, I'm a pediatrician here on Treaty 1 territory. So that's in Winnipeg. So, there's so many threads. I think some of it has to do with the culture that we're currently in, meaning that in other parts of the world, the arts are valued to a different degree. And for example, hospitals in parts of Australia and the Netherlands prioritize in their health environments that art must be part of their, they use a percentage of their income each year to ensure that artists are part of the surrounding of the health facilities, as one example. I do think that art is actually devalued well before medicine. It is in our society, at least in North America, as I've seen it. And so one of the things, Jerry said, well, what are some ideas? We talk a lot about in healthcare about creating pipeline programs all the way to kindergarten, where we engage with children to talk about their potential to be healthcare providers, because many of them, especially from oppressed groups, don't see that as their future. They have no role models. And so one thing that you made me think about is whether we could engage with in creating some new pipeline programs is, art and health together collectively, perhaps creating a program and environment to bring children into this space, to bring both the artist student as well as the medical or health professional student in some of the conversations. So just thinking about how we can grow and invest in different ways. So hope that helped. That's a starting point, Jerry. And there's definitely funding to research that potential about patient voice that Ian talked about, etc. So Eleanor, looking forward to your thoughts.
So specifically, I was thinking of the Australian examples because I know they have far more therapeutic use of artists, and so does also the state of Texas. I don't know if you know Jill Sonke's work in Texas, but there is a large arts and healthcare organization in the States. What I wondered is, my question is, can Canadian medicine benefit from using the research and the absolutely strong evidence-based work from Australia and the States without having to redo it? So that's question one, and I can't see why we wouldn't. Not question two, but information two. Art Smarts was a program started to get arts happening in schools with the McConnell Foundation, nearly 30 years ago. It ran in 10 different cities in Canada with 10 different models. The suggestion was that if at grade 4, 5, 6, every student got a certain amount of exposure to each of the arts, music, visual arts, writing, drama, dance, that if they got that through those critical years, about age 8, 9, 10, or just before puberty, that you would then set a changed attitude into using the arts into our culture, which is, it's a very odd thing that we don't value them very much on the large scale, because almost every immigrant population that comes to Canada, and that's a great deal of us, values the arts of their own culture very, very highly. And part of, I think, of what has happened is that people's artistic expression has been siloed in relation to their culture of origin. And aside from music, there's not that much shared expression or shared experience of the arts because of that very strong own culture experience. Lots of things to say about that. But the McConnell Foundation put an enormous amount of money into Art Smarts across the country for about 15 years. If you're looking at an arts and healthcare outreach, I don't know if McConnell is approachable, but if you don't have it on your radar, it might be worth looking at.
We did apply at one point to McConnell. Yeah.
And we'll apply again.
We'll apply again. We didn't get past the first phase, unfortunately, but
we did just get 25,000 from,
yes, we did
from New Horizons to bring this project into the community with the Dementia Society. So I'm very excited about that.
I had just messaged actually both Carol and Jenny because we in the equity and health science and systems lab, we actually have a co-op program that we run with high school students with underrepresented youth that are looking to enter into the health system, and might be interesting to just see if we can weave in some exposure with them. They're highly motivated, and they may be able to give us a little bit of thinking on how to bring this back in to high school students as well. At least the students that I've had already have really opened my eyes into practicalities. Sometimes it's nice to have somebody who doesn't have as much gray hair as I do think about these things.
Diane.
Well, I think if we're measuring gray hair, I'm just going to put my head down. So, I think this is really a conversation worth carrying on. We're not going to find the answer or the answers. I presume there are multiple answers, actually. I put in the chat, I think it's important to weave it into what's already there as opposed to thinking about it as an add-on, yet another thing that students have to take on and learn. And they're swamped, they're overwhelmed. One of the ways I weave it in is through my workshops. And I usually have, because I'm a lover of the arts, I usually have a visual art piece, and I'll talk about that as I'm going through. So for example, I just gave a presentation, a workshop actually to sick kids, to the providers at Sick Kids who are so burnt out. And I wove the arts all through as a way of reaching in and reaching out, and allowing and giving space to tell their stories. So it's not about saying here the arts are something you need to connect with. It was just allowing it to happen. So I think we can do that probably through our teaching in residency and med school as well. Although I'm kind of on the way out of that, unfortunately.
Well, Diane,
Letting my hair down.
You've given me some ideas that I might actually think, because I'm on service for 2 weeks coming up, and I tend to do non-traditional kind of teaching, which engages the learners very differently. So I might be thinking about this a little bit more. And
I'll reach out to me, honestly.
I am curious. I'm really curious, and I know I'm going to try and get maybe some of our students to connect up with Barby and maybe Eleanor and others, just to hear your voices. And might be actually helpful for them as they know what they're getting going into the health system, to hear your vantage points as well. It's hard to believe time has flown very quickly. I saw, Barby, you had your hand up there.
Yes, I really, before the time is gone, just wanted to say I will be willing to participate in any way that you think might create willing audiences or people who want to have this as something they can look to for a new way of living.
That's super exciting, and thank you. And I will be taking you up on that offer, I'm sure. And if there are ways that in the EqHS lab and Sanokondu we can amplify the work that Radical Connections has been doing, we'd love to do that and help each other out.
Yes, and Eleanor, I hope we keep connected to the greatest extent possible.
So thank you. Thank you all. This has been an absolutely stellar session. Even though I couldn't have the visual, there was so much power that was coming through on what I was hearing, and then coming and seeing the chat and the conversation. This has been I hope a very powerful experience for all of you, and it certainly has been for me. I do, as the person who's closing things out, have some of the housekeeping kind of stuff to take care of. And one of the things we do with our sessions is we do formal evaluations, and just to help us get a sense of how we can continue to make these sessions more effective and more resonating with those that are participating. So please take an opportunity to fill in the chat, the survey for an evaluation. The link is in the chat as well. Minka has placed it there for us. Or you can just message us as we keep going. I wanted to thank Eleanor and Barby as well for really authentically sharing a lot of things and giving us sort of a glimpse into the fun that both of you seem to have, but a dialogue that is happening, a conversation. It never felt to me as a unidirectional kind of thing, which typically happens with healthcare provider or someone who's engaging with a patient or a client. Seems like this felt like we were watching two people sitting at a cafe having a chat, having a conversation, and having a good time about this. So thank you for allowing us to do so, and thank you to Jenny and to Carol for also providing so much support in the background to bringing this session to this community. And I look forward to trying to explore how we can continue to collaborate and support each other with this work. I also wanted to thank our colleagues at the University of Manitoba and the EqHS lab for helping bring this session to our community as well, and our ongoing sessions. And we have our planning committee as well that I have to thank for their advice and connections with bringing these sessions together. We do have upcoming sessions that are coming up. We're actually building off of this session tomorrow morning. We have our breakfast through dinner networking session, where more of an informal conversation and looking at the concepts of art and social justice in healthcare. So if you're interested or able to participate with that, this is intended to really serve as more of an open space for conversation. And our next critical dialogue session is going to be on March 7th, and starting at 6 p.m. to 8. Dr. Kanine Osei-Tutu and Dr. Arno Kumagai are going to be talking about performative equity. This was a workshop that they had actually offered at the International Conference on Residency Education. It was just amazing. There were lots of deep thinking in that session. And so we're encouraging people to attend, share this out as well, to participate with this session. And just a final thank you to everyone. And this has been a tremendous session, and we look forward to seeing many of you at other sessions, and everyone is welcome to attend. These are free, and we want to try and share these sessions out to everyone. So thanks very much, and have yourself a great day. The snow is now stopped, at least in this part of Ottawa. So a little bit of shoveling for those that have to worry about stuff like that. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the session tomorrow actually starts at 11.
Oh, it starts at 11. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you so
again
much.
for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you, Barbie and Eleanor.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Jenny, for helping with getting everything organized in the back there.
You're welcome.
Really, really wonderful session. So thank you. Oh, we lost